Hello. First of all, I want to thank you all for watching my show. It is now August 30th, 2020. Now, my name's Andrew Fetter, and probably wondering some little background about me. Besides having, I think I've said in a prior show that I had a radio show for about 7 years on BBS Radio. It was called When Pigs Fly. You can go find it. bbsradio.com. When Pigs Fly. I had numerous shows then. Feel free to check that out or go to Amazon. I had 3 novels, published novels. The first one is when the Angels Have Risen. My second book is called The Heretic, and my third published novel is called Spirit. You can check those out on Amazon. But this is enough about me. I don't want to get into that. I have a lot of background. I was I'm into geopolitics. I'm actually an advisor within the geopolitical arena for overseas, and I'm a historian, or wouldn't call myself a historian, but so other people would, and relating to as a scholar. I have a plethora of things, backgrounds in my life. But one thing I have to tell you, I did work for the Democratic Party. I worked for the Democratic Party. I worked for actually the Obama campaign in 2008, and actually before that, Hillary in 2008, and before that, for John Kerry campaign in 2004. But I left, like many people. They say they swallow the red pill. Well, mine sort of like lingered and slowly dissipated in my mouth, and I left in 2009. The reason why, and I became an independent. I've been independent since. As I said, I'm an independent thinker. I think for myself. I like what I see some things what the GOP have done, but I see that because of Donald Trump. He's making the party more pragmatic, more universal, more patriotic, more nationalist, less anti-globalist. He's getting back to what the Republican Party stood for, and he's changed that. But about me, my father was actually a lifetime Democrat, and he was actually close friends with P.R. Salinger, who happened to be one of the close confidants and lead advisors for President John F. Kennedy. But my father, as him being a lifetime Democrat, and he remains so, he did vote twice for a Republican. He voted for Reagan in both his terms, and Governor Duke Majan of California, both in the 80s. And I have to say, I also voted for Reagan and Duke Majan as well. And I was like I had said earlier, I was a Democrat until 2009. But what bothers, the reason I'm bringing this up is because when I was working in the campaign, and I'm going to explain, the Democrats keep on bringing up the question of character. And they applied it toward comparing Biden versus Trump. Trump saying he has all this high character and he has these, it's all about the character, right? They keep on saying the character. What the hell is the character? Well, by definition, character is the mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual. That's according to Webster's dictionary. I had to look that up. So I'm not going to get into the moral qualities because we already know Biden's sort of like diminished there. I mean, his cognitive skills, his mental abilities are very questionable. I mean, he'd be lucky if he can get through a debate. But I don't want to lower the bar, as they said. I just, from my observation, and people have said, but who knows, he seems to have been losing some gray matter between his ears. So going on that issue of moral standards, I'm going to play them equally, and straight up. Trump does not walk on water. He has a history of being a womanizer, had a lot of women. We all know that. But we also know that he's a little rough on the edges. The way he says things and he tweets some things. But this sort of is like a characteristic of a lot of New Yorkers, how they talk and present themselves, and not to generalize, but it's pretty common. But I wouldn't. But that has nothing to do about character, now does it? Character has to do with your moral standards. It's not how you really conduct yourself, because that's sort of your mannerisms. Mannerisms aren't your, and the way you say things may not. I mean, if you cuss and use profanity, that's not your character. That's just, you're how you are. Unless you're writing for an article, you're writing a book, that would be okay. That's the character aspects of a character. But when you talk about character as an individual, you're, like I said, the definition is relating to moral standards. So I'm going to apply these moral standards in a character thing. So, and when we deal with morals, we're dealing with them, well, we try to apply them to an objective level. And morals actually are pretty, in a way, subjective, because they're based upon morals, which depends on the society and the common society standards, right? But I'm going to try as best as possible to make it more objective. Like, for example, we can say and come to an agreement, moral standards. It's bad to kill or rape. It's bad to steal. It's bad to be corrupt. It's bad cronyism. Those would be like moral standards, right? Or how you do with other people and treat other people. So I'm not going to twist and turn things. I'm going to keep them pretty simple. But if you look at the issues and how they apply to equally to both Trump and Biden without any BS twists, you're going to find, based upon facts and truths, the clear picture of who has moral standards and who has character. And I'm going to be as objective as possible. But when we speak of great character or moral standards, we're talking about something that CNN, MSNBC, and New York Times and Washington Post don't have any, because they use they twist and fabricate lies. They'll cut 3 sentences out of what Trump would say and take out of context, all for a political agenda. That is not having moral standards, because it's a lie. I mean, look at they did that little kid, that young kid Catholic kid who put on a MAGA hat, and they went after him. Of course, he won in their lawsuit. They had to pay the booty to pay him. So they don't have any objective. They cannot be morally objective and they certainly don't have any moral standards when you consider their characteristics. So what are the real differences between Trump and Biden when you talk about characters, or character standards, or moral standards? Well, let's look at Trump. I mean, before even Trump became president, people can acknowledge he had helped minorities such as African Americans, Jewish Americans, and others who are subject to hate and discrimination, and this is all well documented. I mean, Jesse Jackson, Rosa Parks gave Trump an award. People acknowledge how great he was doing, helping out the minority communities. This is all well documented. Now, some might question his business tactics. The business tactics they use in construction, especially in New York, the construction industry and the development, it's pretty ruthless. And me having, I had a company that was about 300 employees, I can say that construction industry can be very cutthroat. So, and you can imagine in New York with those high rises and that kind of money and dealing with unions and things like that, it's very crazy. And not just New York, but in any time you deal with that kind of business. But what about his relationship, and how did he deal with people who were, people who were in his family that were his employees? Were his employees how did he treat them? In fact, he treated them pretty much high regard. He was known, actually, he pioneered, and this is another aspect, I don't know if you call this moral character, but I think it's pretty interesting. He actually pioneered in the construction industry of having women upper management in his corporations. He was one of the first. This also can be said in his administration. In fact, he has the most women working in upper advisory and cabinet position combined than any prior administration before that. This may not have anything to do about character, but sure says a lot, doesn't it, about him. So, what would you do with people who actually help people when you give them opportunity in a position? What would you see about somebody giving somebody a second chance? This, without question, is where Trump triumphs. And this is a moral standard, helping others. There's something that you probably saw in the RNC, maybe you watched it, you didn't, but I thought it was pretty eye-opening. Maybe people, there's so many great speeches and so many things happening, but one of the most prolific things that I thought was pretty fascinating, that you won't hear on CNN, you didn't hear on Washington Post or MSNBC, certainly not out of Rachel Maddow's mouth, but how Trump had given over $35 million to victims of human trafficking. And he's also created a massive task force to go after human traffickers in the U.S. and the world. I mean, it's only, if you watch fake news, it's like I said, more than likely you never heard about it. But Trump also initiated these executive orders that specifically on a massive scale that no other administration has ever done. But what does this say about his characteristic or his character standards or his moral standards? Another thing that was brought up that you're probably not aware of, that was actually brought up by what he's done for the Native American community. I know there's some Native Americans who don't realize what he's done because it's not related, but because of the Democrats. But there is actually a large amount of Native Americans who recognize it. I mean, it's recognized. You saw it probably if you watched it. The head of the Navajos, and there's others. He's had commissions after commissions, but you never saw this on CNN or MSNBC. Of course not. But I have to tell you something that I actually personally witnessed. I saw how Obama and Biden, with their character, they actually cut funds to the Native Americans. This happened about between 2009 to 2010. They actually cut funds and diverted the monies that were supposed to go, because I was shooting the movie with the Hopi, and I was in Hopi land, where they cut funds, and suddenly there was mass layoffs. They didn't even have money to fix their roads, and suddenly the winter hit, and they couldn't bring their logs up to their mesas. And we had to orchestrate with a lot of great volunteers who helped to sort of help bring up lumber to the mesas for the Hopi. And the only reason the reason that happened was because they cut their funds. Biden cut their funds. I mean, with Obama, and they moved that money into a so-called stimulus. I saw actually them Hopi removing things that they've had for generations in their families, like artifacts and things, and take them off their walls and things and selling them just to live. It was really, really deeply heartening. This is Biden. Trump, on the other hand, gave billions of dollars in support for the Native American communities. In fact, he gave over billions of dollars in relief for COVID. He also did something that you probably didn't hear about either. He implemented an executive order that created a massive FBI task force that would be delegated in looking into missing Native American girls who were abducted, raped, and killed, and bring those criminals to justice, while at the same time helping those victims or the families of the victims. And they've also, in his executive order, expanded the Indian Affairs Office. To what standard? What moral standard could he do? Oh yeah, to develop education and economic opportunities and employment that not a single prior administration ever did. Oh, what does that say about Trump's characters? His character, right? It says a lot about him. I mean, he created policies for the development of African Americans, Hispanic American communities with such things as opportunity zones to develop their economic areas. He gave them, trying to continually promote school choice for better education, irrespective of zip code. So African Americans and Hispanic Americans and others in the inner cities could have the opportunity of education. He's lowered poverty levels. He's had record employment levels in all these communities. And he also did something that Biden never did with Obama. He funded for 10 years the black colleges that no even previous administration never did. So what does this say about Donald Trump's character? I mean, you probably heard it during the RNC, promises made, promises kept, right? So let me just ask you, if someone promise you something and they keep that promise, what does that say about this person? What does it say about their character? It says they have a lot of integrity, right? You can't say that about Biden, but you sure as hell can say about Donald Trump. It's promises made, promises kept. In fact, he's the only president that has ever done this. Literally, not a single president, including Reagan, has kept all the promises. He checked them off and he did them. All in 4 years, in spite of all the crap that the media, lies, Democrats impeachment, fake hoax impeachment, the Russian hoax, all that's bullshit. He was able to achieve it. Why? Because one thing I can tell you, Donald Trump has a lot of integrity. He may not say things and do things in such a weird way, but he gotta hand it to him. He has a lot of integrity. He kept his promises, something that Biden has never done and will never do. Now, while Biden was almost 4 years trying to clean up the corruption and the domestic and foreign affair mess that had engulfed the three that was created by the three previous administrations, Biden can easily be labeled as the standard of corruption. In fact, he would be the model of cronyism for historians to study. I mean, if I can tell you, 100 years from now or 50 years from now, if somebody I had a student and I was teaching history, and some student goes, well, what would be a great example of a politician being corrupt? Or wait, let's say, what administration would you say was the most corrupt? I'd easily can say, oh, the Obama-Biden administration. I mean, come on. Uranium One, the quid pro quo with Hillary, the Ukraine deals, the China deals, on and on and on, which I'll get into. I mean, come on. Biden was pretty much corrupt. He'd probably be the person I would say it would be exemplified besides Hillary Clinton as being corrupt. So, how does Biden even have the audacity to talk about high character when for 47 years all he's made his career was based upon corruption? And where does Biden have the audacity to question Trump's character when he is the epitome of corruption? I mean, you're not aware, but when he was vice president, his brother James got a $1.5 billion building contract to build residences in Iraq when he had absolutely no background ever in construction. But he got $1.5 billion to build homes that were they even built? I often wonder that, I mean, They build homes over there with cinder block, basically. So, and they're not building homes like in California or Nevada or Texas or Minnesota or Florida or New York or Rhode Island. It's Iraq. How many homes did he actually really build? And if he didn't build it, where did that $1.5 billion end up? I always wondered about that. For decades, Biden has also pandered to blue-collar workers. And then what does he do? He creates the NAFTA deal, takes their jobs, sends them off to manufacturing plants to China and elsewhere. You got to realize Biden is a globalist. He doesn't give a rat's ass about American businesses or the American workers. He never has. His son literally got $1 billion+ from China, from communist China. So basically, Biden is China's little bitch. I'm just calling it. Of course, there's others. You know what? Now I'm coming to think about it. I've sort of talked about, but I never really did. But I'll say it here. Who else is China's little bitch? Hollywood. What do you think? Why do you think they hate Trump so much? Because when he got elected, one of his policies was to go after China, and China happens to bank Hollywood, the film industry. Why does the NBA and all the players, he's suddenly a racist, we don't like him? Because you heard it. It's China. LeBron James told a NBA coach, to shut up, don't talk bad about China. Even Biden himself doesn't say anything. Because why? China owns them. They're bitch. I can't be more exact on that. So if you think that Biden is all that he has all this character, no. In fact, this is actually a fact that through intelligence information, China is actually supporting Biden. They want him to win. They really do. They want those manufacturing plants and the jobs in America to go back to China and go back the way it was 4 years ago. So we know why and what is high character. And I can tell you, Biden doesn't have any. It's sort of weird how, another thing I've seen, how Democrats, including Biden, have often accused others, specifically Trump and his people, of doing things that they themselves are guilty and have done, when Trump and his administration hasn't even done anything. What was the fake impeachment they had? It was about abuse of power, which he never did. But you can't say the same about Biden or Obama, right? Under the Obama-Biden administration, they actually used the IRS to go after political adversaries. That's a fact. Snowden exposed how Biden and Obama the administration was using the NSA to actively spy on political adversaries. Not just journalists, but senators and congressmen. This is before Trump. Before they spied on Trump and his campaign and General Flynn. And by the way, all that was done under the direction of Obama and Biden. And there was a former NSA head who left. It's a fact. It happened in 2012. These aren't theories. These are actual facts. At present, right now, you have the Durham has actively involved in a criminal investigation on pursuit of the spying and what happened. And they've recently indicted and prosecuted, and then he was pled guilty, the head FBI attorney, for changing information on the FISA warrant so it would go through, so they could spy on Donald Trump and his campaign. And we know all the signatures on the applications. And by the way, the application says verified, but what it was verified information? What was the evidence that supported all the warrants? It was a Russian manufactured, paid for dossier called the Steele dossier that was paid by Hillary Clinton. Not just for one warrant, but multiple warrants. They actually reinitiated them to spy on who? Trump. And who was actively involved with all that? Biden, who, by the way, was actively involved in unmasking names up until 2 to 3 weeks before Trump is being inaugurated. I mean, what did he need that information for? Biden was actively involved in that lair, if you want to call it, and all this stuff, including manufacturing evidence to go after, and by the way, which is abuse of power, to manufacture evidence and lies to prosecute incoming NSA National Security Advisor General Flynn. Why? Because General Flynn would be able to assess the intelligence that an active coup was in progress by the Obama-Biden administration. He would know exactly what was going on, and he would tell Trump, hey dude, you know what they're doing? They're spying on you, and they're trying to create a coup against you as you're becoming president. So tell me, Biden, who has the moral character here, being a spy to commit treasonous coup? I mean, it's pretty clear that Biden's a liar. I mean, I remember he also plagiarized a lot. He actually plagiarized his speech, his acceptance that he plagiarized a Canadian politician. Can you believe that? But this is him. He's a liar. He's a corrupt politician. He panders votes because he thinks people who vote for them are still stupid. I hate to say it because that's what he thinks. And then he sells his soul to China, communist China. And he's going to use his office like he's always been for quid pro quo enterprises, very much like to Hillary Clinton did. But he has done it for over 47 years. So who has character? I mean, Trump gave up his ability to run his corporations. For what? Taking all the lying crap from all the fake news media? For what? To hear all this crap and being attacked by Democrats trying to impeach him for BS that never happened? For what? Because all he cared about was making America better, to clean up the BS, the corruption, the swamp, to get rid of the globalist agenda and make America first, because he cares about Americans first. And by the way, the betterment for all Americans, by the way, including minorities and women. So please, Biden, when it comes to character, he doesn't even fit in Trump's little pinky toe. I mean, it's a joke. Now, I've attached here, or you may have seen it, I hope if you have, you haven't, 2 amazing speeches. There were a lot of speeches in RNC that were amazing, but these I felt were poignant in this thing. The subject that I'm talking about of character. Pam Bondi, who she articulates Biden's corrupt history and, in fact, his contemporary history. You probably don't even know, by the way, I forgot to tell you that the Ukraine government, and this is fact, has Joe Biden under a criminal investigation. Yes, for corruption and for his quid pro quo activities and trying to obstruct their prosecution of Burisma people. So, which is a whole nother story, but you can Google, find out, blah blah blah. Anyway, the other video besides Bam Bondi I think that was highly important is really, because he gets right into a lot of aspects, is the DNI Director of National Intelligence, Richard Grenell. And he opens an eye-opening articulation of Biden's involvement, not only about his failed foreign policies that caused travesty and instability across the world, but he gets into the attempted coup and actual evidence that he articulates it. I'm not going to go in because you can see it, hopefully. And he shows how he almost destroyed our republic. Grinnell explains Biden's character to a T, or lack thereof, and it includes his lack of foreign affairs aspects. So, one thing I would ask, who has character? Where was Joe Biden's character in supporting the Iraq War? Or lying about our ambassador being killed in Benghazi, Libya? Or giving billions of cash to Iran? Or destroying our relations with both Sunni Arabs and Israelis? Come on, Joe. You don't have any character. You never have. You're a tool for the Chinese, the communist Chinese. Where was your character when you said that you wouldn't put your kids in the jungle, the black jungle as you refer to, or your support of segregation, or you giving your eloquent eulogy praising the former KKK leader, Senator Robert Byrd? Or where was your standard of character outsourcing American jobs to, your business partner, or I should say your business master, Communist China, since you now are owned by them? Come on, man. Well, I just hope you continue watching. Please watch those other speeches by Grinnell and Bondi. And I want to thank you for watching, and God bless you all. Thank you.
I'm Pam Bondi. Our party's theme tonight is America, the Land of Opportunity. And listening to the stories of discoveries and deliverance, you can't help but be proud to call this country home. But for Joe Biden, it's been the land of opportunism, not opportunity. As a career prosecutor and former Attorney General of Florida, I fought corruption, and I know what it looks like, whether it's done by people wearing pinstripe suits or orange jumpsuits. At the Democrats' convention, we were told to look at Joe Biden as the model of integrity. But when you look at his 47-year career in politics, the people who benefited are his family members, not the American people. Let's take a closer look. We all know about Joe's son, Hunter Biden. A corrupt Ukrainian oligarch put Hunter on the board of his gas company, even though he had no experience in Ukraine or in the energy sector. None. Yet he was paid millions to do nothing. He only had one qualification that mattered. He was the son of the man in charge of distributing U.S. aid to Ukraine. And recently reported information revealed that a few months after Hunter Biden joined that corrupt company's board, the Obama-Biden State Department began doing business with them, even when it remained under investigation for corruption. And it gets worse. That very same company was being investigated by a Ukrainian prosecutor. Joe Biden, the Vice President of the United States, threatened to withhold aid to Ukraine unless that same prosecutor was fired. And then he was fired. Hunter only resigned from that board just before his dad announced his campaign for president. Now let's talk about China. Fact: Joe Biden flew to China on Air Force Two with Hunter along for the ride. They said he was just there as a family member, but we know that's untrue. In Beijing, Hunter didn't just go sightseeing. He had meetings with his Chinese bank partners. Hunter even arranged for his dad to meet with one of the partners. 10 days later, those Chinese communist bankers approved millions to go to Hunter's firm. And those bankers work for the Chinese Communist Party, which oppresses their people, cheated American workers for decades, and covered up a deadly virus. To this day, Hunter controls a 10% stake in that firm. And Joe Biden's done more than look the other way on China. He said, "The Chinese aren't our competition. Come on, man, they're not bad folks." Come on, Joe. Talk to the folks in Middle America who lost countless jobs to China while your son was getting rich with them. But there's more. Fact. There have been numerous press reports that have shown other close Biden family members benefited from Joe's 47-year political career. Joe Biden was point person on Iraq. The president of a construction firm met with Biden's team in the White House, and then who did they hire to build thousands of houses in Iraq? Joe Biden's close family member, who, you guessed it, had no experience in the industry and no experience in Iraq. A company official bragged that it helps to have a family member, the vice president, as partner. The family member put it more bluntly by saying, "There's a line of 747s filled with cash ready to invest." Now let's follow the money down south. Again, as reported in the press, yet another close family member of Joe's set his sights on Costa Rica and Jamaica, where millions of dollars flowed from the Obama-Biden administration in taxpayer-backed loans to projects linked to, yes, that same family member. These aren't isolated incidents. It is a deliberate pattern of conduct. And that's just what he did as vice president. Imagine what he'd do as president. How many American families would be allowed to get away with this? Why should there be one standard for the elite political class and another set of rules for the rest of us? When millions of Americans voted for Donald Trump, they knew he'd be different, and he is. He's a tough, no-nonsense outsider who can't be bought or intimidated. He won't even take a paycheck from the American people. He donates his paycheck to charities across this country. Democrats have been lecturing America about integrity for 4 years, while their nominee has been writing the textbook on abuse of power for 40 years. If they want to make this election a choice between who's saving America and who's swindling America, bring it on. Joe says he'll build back better. Yeah, build the Bidens back better. Our president is in this to build a safer, better, and stronger America. And he will finish what he started to keep this a real land of opportunity for everyone. If you want to check your voting status, secure your ballot, or register to vote, text VOTE to 88022. Remember, the best is yet to come.
During the presidential primary debates 4 years ago, one outsider stood alone and said in public what most Americans thought in private. It was 14 years after the start of the war in Afghanistan and 12 years after the invasion of Iraq, where thousands of American troops had died and trillions in taxpayer dollars had been spent. And yet no candidate could bring themselves to admit that something had gone badly wrong with American foreign policy. That the American voter, the American soldier, and the American taxpayer had all been let down. Except for one, Donald Trump. He called America's endless wars what they were, a disaster. The media was shocked because Donald Trump was running as a Republican. And yet he said out loud what we all knew, that American foreign policy was failing to make Americans safer. After the end of the Cold War, Democrats and Republicans in Washington bought into the illusion that the whole world would start to resemble America. And so they started to pursue unlimited globalization. They welcomed China into the World Trade Organization. They engaged in nation building in Afghanistan and tried to export democracy to Iraq. They signed a nuclear deal with Iran and a global climate agreement in Paris. But they didn't ground any of it in the interests of the average American. So for decades, while Washington politicians built a global system, American wages stagnated. Our great cities and industries were hollowed out. Entire communities were devastated, and our manufacturing plants were shipped off to China. That's what happened when Washington stopped being the capital of the United States and started being the capital of the world. As U.S. ambassador to Germany, I had a front row seat to Donald Trump's America First foreign policy. I wish every American could see how President Trump negotiates on their behalf. I've watched President Trump charm the Chancellor of Germany while insisting that Germany pay its NATO obligations. I was proud to witness President Trump say to foreign leaders, "I don't blame you for wanting America to pay for your security. I actually respect you for out-negotiating the presidents before me. But it stops with me. I won't let the American taxpayer be taken advantage of." Donald Trump's administration has always made clear that our priority is the American people's security. That's the job of all leaders, to put their people first. And we've seen how this strategy has succeeded. In 4 short years, Donald Trump has led even some Washington Democrats to agree on the Chinese threat, on trade deals that benefit America first, on alliances that share responsibility. In 4 years, Donald Trump didn't start any new wars. He brought troops home. He rebuilt the military and signed peace deals that make Americans safer. The Washington elites want you to think this kind of foreign policy is immoral, and so they call it nationalist. That tells you all you need to know. The D.C. crowd thinks when they call Donald Trump a nationalist, they're insulting him, as if the American president isn't supposed to base foreign policy on America's national interests. A return to the Biden way of thinking means America gives the radical terrorist regime in Tehran a plane load of cash in the middle of the night. Well, you see, President Trump also sent an aircraft in the middle of the night to deal with Iran. But that plane was on a different mission, an airstrike to take out the head of Iran's terror machine who plotted the deaths of Americans. But we also must be clear that when those who seek freedom take tremendous personal risk in places like Hong Kong, Tehran, or Minsk, there is no doubt who President Trump's administration supports. We will always stand with the people who fight for their God-given freedoms. Don't be fooled. The Washington establishment is trying to sell you on their candidate. Joe Biden was first elected to the Senate in 1972, 48 years ago. Well, it's actually the typical Washington story. Just this year, 22 Democrats ran for president. They rejected all of the outsiders and nominated the ultimate Washington insider, someone they had to pull out of retirement. Every time Joe Biden offers a new idea, you should ask yourself, why didn't he try that over the last 48 years? Today, the Democrats blame a global pandemic that started in China on President Trump, and they still blame Russia for Hillary Clinton's loss in 2016. As acting director of national intelligence, I saw the Democrats' entire case for Russian collusion, and what I saw made me sick to my stomach. The Obama-Biden administration secretly launched a surveillance operation on the Trump campaign and silenced the many brave intelligence officials who spoke up against it. They presented bogus information as facts, They lied to judges. Then they classified anything that undermined their case. And after Donald Trump won the election, when they should have continued the American tradition of helping the president-elect transition into the White House, they tried instead to undercut him even more. Former Vice President Joe Biden asked intelligence officials to uncover the hidden information on President Trump's incoming national security advisor 3 weeks before the inauguration. That's the Democrats. Between surveillance, classifications, leaks, and puppet candidates, they never want the American people to know who's actually calling the shots. But with Donald Trump, you always know exactly who is in charge. Because the answer is you. You're in charge. Not lobbyists, not special interests, not warmongers or China sympathizers or globalization fanatics. With Donald Trump and Mike Pence in the White House, the boss is the American people. President Trump rightly calls his foreign policy America First. America First does not advance the interests of one group of Americans at the expense of another. It has no bias about red or blue, educated or not educated, urban or rural. America First is simply the belief that politicians should focus on the equality and dignity of every American, and that this duty is fulfilled by promoting the safety and wealth of the American people above all else. That's America First. That's the Trump doctrine. And that, my friends, is 4 more years.